House Committee on Judiciary come to order. Today is February 21st, 2013. First item on the agenda is the possible introduction of committee measures. LC 107 is relating to the legal and physical custody of juvenile offenders. LC 2260 relating to elections and declaring an emergency. LC 3475 relating to criminal justice revolving account. LC 3476 relating to crime victims' rights. LC 3478 relating to crime victims. LC 3479 relating to restitution collection pilot program, creating new provisions. LC 3483 related to organized crime. LC 3484 relating to appeals in juvenile court proceedings. LC 3488 relating to restitution for crime victims. LC 3553 relating to post-conviction relief. And LC 3750 relating to exchange facilitators. A reminder that any voting for these bills is a courtesy vote to get them into the system. Does not mean you support or don't support the bill. Representative Krieger.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move that the LC's number 107, 2068, 2260, 3475, 3476, 3478, 3479, 3483, 3484, 3488, 3553, 3556, and 3750 be introduced as committee bills.
Thank you. Representative Krieger moves the LCs to be introduced as committee bills. Is there any discussion? Any objection? Hearing none, so ordered. Open a public hearing on House Bill 2594 and call Representative Hicks.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, what House Bill 2594 does is it modifies the standard for civil commitment of persons with mental illness. It conforms language across all statutes to persons with mental illness rather than mentally ill person.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Wally Hicks, House District 3, Josephine County. There are many persons here to testify regarding the details of House Bill 2594, so I'll keep my comments brief. So far, an enormous amount of work has been dedicated to the concept underlying House Bill 2594, and many of the persons who are working on this concept are going to be here today to fill in the details of what this bill does. The bill, as it sits before the committee today, is not the likely final version of the bill that would probably emerge at the end of this process. However, I think it is good and productive to start the public conversation regarding this concept of mental health reform and in this particular area of it, meaning civil commitment. And so to collect public input and to come up with whatever this body may deem to be an appropriate final version of a bill. And so that said, I won't belabor these points anymore. I just simply want to emphasize that I look forward to collecting as much information as we can at this stage as we hash out what the final language of this bill and this concept will be. And I welcome any questions on that.
Are any questions for Representative Hicks? No, thank you. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to next have testimony from Judge Wolke on the phone. Good.
You've reached the Josephine County Circuit Court. Our office hours are... One moment, please.
Judge Wolke.
Judge Wolke, this is Jeff Barker, Chair of the Judiciary Committee. We've opened the hearing on House Bill 2594 and invite your testimony at this time.
Thank you so much, and honored to be with you folks, and I thank Representative Hicks for his invitation. I'm going to try to put you on my hands-free phone. Can you folks all hear me okay?
Yes.
My way background, I've been an Oregon lawyer since 1975.
Judge, could you identify yourself, please?
Excuse me?
Could you identify yourself for the record, please?
I'm Pat Wolke, W-O-L-K-E. I'm a circuit court judge here in Josephine County.
Thank you.
And by way of background, I've been an Oregon lawyer since 1975. I became a pro tem judge in 2004, was appointed as a regular judge by Governor Kulingoski in 2006, and I've been one ever since. I started the Josephine County Mental Health Court in February 2009 and continued to preside over it. Apart from that, I've had extensive experience both as a lawyer and as a judge in civil commitment hearings. And today I am happy to be with you, honored to be with you, and I enthusiastically support House Bill 2594. The reason that I do is that our current definition in Oregon Revised Statute is what it means to be a mentally ill person is extremely vague. It merely says if you're a mentally ill person, if you're a danger to yourself or to others, or if you're unable to provide for your basic needs. Because that definition is so vague, it's been interpreted and reinterpreted by the Oregon Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court to kind of refine the definition. And the way the definition is now interpreted is to mean you're a danger to yourself or a danger to others if you're immediately a danger to yourself or to others. In other words, your dangerousness is assessed right at the time of the hearing, and your prior history, no matter how dangerous it's been or how concerning it's been, is oftentimes not relevant. So there's a real focus on dangerousness to try to assess that on the date of the hearing, which I believe is very artificial. The second prong of that definition, which is unable to provide for your basic needs, has been interpreted by the Oregon Court of Appeals, starting with the case of State versus Bunting in 1992, as meaning probably unable to survive in the near future. So that definition really has replaced the statutory definition of unable to provide for your basic needs. That is an extremely rigid, high definition. And I read a guest opinion in Oregon Live that I think says it best, and it's by Dr. Loki, and I believe that Dr. Loki might be with you and testifying today, but what Dr. Loki said in his article is, it's like trying to time exactly when to slam on the brakes of a bus speeding toward a brick wall so it just touches the wall without causing damage or injury. And that's really where we're at with our current definition. And that is why I think that way beyond time that the definition should be revised as it has been in House Bill 2594. And I want to be brief because I know that you probably have other witnesses there, but I just want to very briefly give you my perspective on how that plays out in real life. That very narrow and rigid definition is not just known to circuit court judges who have to go through civil commitment hearings, but it's well known in the mental health community, which is to say that if a person goes to the emergency room, an extreme mental health crisis, the emergency room is going to apply that exact same definition. Are you probably not going to survive in the near future? If we can construe a set of facts where it's likely that you will survive in the near future, then you're not committable. You're not entitled to services here in the emergency room unless you voluntarily want to engage in services. And not only in the emergency room, pre-commitment investigators, people that go out and investigate whether a person is subject to commitment. I see this happen all the time. I read reports from the two-party petitions where people describe a person who is obviously seriously mentally ill, acting out, psychotic, and the pre-commitment investigator goes out and applying that statutory and case law definition as he or she must, comes to the determination that the person doesn't qualify for a civil commitment proceeding. And another kind of collateral effect of this very high definition is that not only do people not qualify for inpatient treatment, which we all know is getting more and more difficult to come by in any event, but they don't qualify for the other less expensive and less intrusive types of treatment that they might be entitled to. and that would be things like assisted outpatient treatment, which is provided in our current law, 4S 426.127. We have it on the books, which is, in my view, would be somewhat like a mental health court, where people come into court and formulate a plan for their recovery, and then the court is able to review that and make sure the person is doing what they should be doing. Statistics tell us that assisted outpatient treatment is almost never used in Oregon. I believe it's never used in Oregon because to get to that point, you have to meet that very, very high criteria of unlikely to survive in the near future. Likewise, we have another statutory procedure, conditional release, ORS 426.130, and we can't use that unless the person meets this very high criteria for commitment. But one thing that I want to throw in there for the legislature to consider would be a slight modification to the in House Bill 2594. We continue with the initial definition of a person as dangerous to self or any other person, and I think that what I would like to see added to that sub A, that definition is an additional sentence that would say, in determining dangerousness, let's see my exact wording here. In determining such dangerousness, the court may consider the allegedly mentally ill person's conduct or condition in 90 days preceding the commitment hearing. And that would allow the commitment court and pre-commitment investigator and so on to assess not only the dangerousness of the person at the instant of the commitment hearing or the instant of the evaluation, but be able to go back for 90 days and take into account other instances of dangerousness that the person may be engaged in. Of course, that may be more or less relevant depending on the circumstances. Let's say it's 75 days ago, maybe less relevant if the person is recovering after that instance 75 days ago, but at least the court could take it into consideration. The current case law really doesn't allow that. And I feel like I've intruded enough. Once again, I appreciate the opportunity to testify, and I want the legislature to know that I am here to assist the legislature or any other group that would like to work toward a comprehensive and much needed revision to Oregon civil commitment law. I have a lot of accrued vacation time. There's nothing I'd rather use it on than on this project. So that's the end of my remarks. Are there any questions from anyone?
Are there any questions for the judge? There are no questions, Your Honor. Thank you very much for taking your time to call in. We appreciate your testimony.
Thank you all.
Okay,
goodbye.
Goodbye. Okay, next we'll call the first group up, Sarah Westerbrook, Lisbeth Gerritsen, and Andy Smith. You can start in any order, but be sure to identify yourself by name for the record. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair Barker and members of the committee. Andy Smith for the City of Portland with Captain Westbrook and Lisbeth Gerritsen. We haven't had a chance to really dig into the bill to formulate a position, but wanted to come and offer comments about our experiences in our work in our community and hopefully be a part of this conversation going forward. So I'll turn it over to Captain Westbrook for her comments.
Thank you. My name is Sarah Westbrook. I'm a captain at the Portland Police Bureau. Thank you very much for inviting me down here and allowing me to give a few of my comments. My understanding of this started in 1985 when I began my law enforcement career, and now here we are in 2013, and there are a lot more people who are extremely mentally ill on the streets of Portland or living in single-resident occupancy homes in Portland, and as a result, the police are responding to calls regarding people who are mentally ill at a level that it's become a routine call. So much so that everyone in the police bureau now has 40 hours of training in helping us understand mental illness and how best to respond and de-escalate folks. That being said, now we've also just started a new behavioral health unit that is specifically dedicated group of police officers that partner with mental health professionals from Project Respond to go out and help us interact with folks on the street. Our experience has been that there are, on the lower risk level, there are folks out there who are living in ways that are frankly don't represent the society of which I believe I live in. We have a couple of men who live on lower southeast Portland, and because of their mental illness, one of which is hoarding behavior, they literally are within like a 12-foot by 6-foot pile of garbage that they have collected over the years, and one man is inside of it and then pulls a tarp over his head, and our police officers are constantly called to try to move him because our businesses are very frustrated. They don't know what to do. It's harming their businesses. So we have a lot of pressure on us from the business community to do something about this. But at the same time, our hearts are broken because we can't get services for this man. And, you know, our society is judged by how we treat the folks who are most vulnerable, and people who are experiencing mental illness are often the most vulnerable in our society. So that would be one end. It's lower risk in the sense of the police interaction. But on the other side of the continuum, we are having a significant number of interactions with folks who we think of high risk to other people. So much so that we make days and hours of plans on how should we figure out how to even approach that door. Maybe we'll just sit outside and watch the door for days to wait for the person to ultimately leave so that we can even talk with them, for fear of that the interaction might go bad because of the person's paranoia or just psychosis, that they're not in touch with reality enough to know who we are, or they won't have a belief that we're trying to help. So we're asking our police officers to do things that I think is not the fundamental purpose of police. A lot of services are needed out there. I'm in support of this bill, but I also don't want to see a reduction in the small amount of services that are being given to folks out there. There's a huge need, and so much of the work has fallen upon our law enforcement officers, and it's incredibly expensive for us as an organization and as a city, and it's not the kind of help that I believe that people deserve to receive. I could go on, but I think that kind of sets the stage for you.
Okay, thank you, Captain. Is there any questions of Captain Western?
And my name is Dr. Lisbeth Gerritsen. I'm a mental health professional with a background in community mental health and delivering crisis community mental health services. I work for the Portland Police Bureau. My purpose here today is to help answer some questions regarding this, or the mental status or the situation that these folks find themselves in. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Senator Williamson.
Thank you all for being here. My question is, Captain Westbrook, take me through what happens when you interact with a person with mental illness, both a high risk and low risk. So would you pick somebody up? Would you take them somewhere? What happens?
Great question. Chair Barker and Representative Williamson, it depends on what we find when we get there, but ultimately, we want to do two things: solve the problem. Somebody called 911 for a reason. We have a problem to try to solve. And two, help people. And so if there is some reason that we're... In order to take somebody somewhere, they have to meet certain criteria. I mean, they have to be either holdable under the commitment law, which is very strict. The way the judge described that was right on, and I really appreciated how he framed the conversation, or commit a crime. Frankly, pretty easy to get charge somebody with a crime who's living on the streets or is completely disorganized. They might not cross the street correctly. They're often, going to be almost run over by a car. We can find different reasons that you could try to put it into the commitment category, or you can try to put it into a crime category. And what we're finding is it's easier, and it's makes better sense for the person to get better care if we arrest them and bring them to jail. I don't know if that's answering your full question. But specifically, did you mean specifically how do we take them into
Chair Barker,
custody?
Please follow up.
So I guess my question is, what kind of resources are out there? And jail is one resource. When you encounter someone on the street and you need to do something to help them.
Right, thank you. Well, we can always call Project Respond, who are mental health crisis workers, to come out, but they don't take a caseload. Their job is to try to connect people to mental health services. So, but that's a resource that we use a lot. There's nobody else who will actually come out to help us other than them. Sometimes we're savvy enough, if we have enough years on and we work in the same place long enough, we'll have phone numbers ourselves on who to call. A great deal of the time, these folks either don't have insurance, they might not meet criteria for any sort of insurance, so there is no care for them to receive. Sometimes the person doesn't have enough insight to believe that they need help or to want help. Sometimes, so that connecting them to services is very difficult, often impossible, and now we have a team that the Portland Police is paying for that can spend days trying to brainstorm how to connect someone to services and making a bunch of phone calls to see if please take this person and see if we can get them under some coverage of insurance.
Thank you.
Does that help? Thank you.
Any further questions? Representative Hicks.
Thank you. And for Dr. Gerritsen, I'd like to hear your take on the nature and level of resources available to treat the mentally ill in Portland.
Okay. You mean just in general? In
Yes,
Portland,
please.
not having to do with the police specifically?
Yeah, in general, please.
Okay. There's outpatient services. I think Captain Westbrook mentioned that one of the main issues, I worked before the Police Bureau, I worked with Project Respond. I was a member of that team. So what that is you get crisis calls, you go out into the community, and you try to solve the problem on the spot, and someone's in crisis. And so if you don't have insurance, it's a major problem. You can always, if someone meets the criteria for a hold, you can write a hold on that person and take them to the hospital. So in Portland, there's 5 area hospitals that will take these holds. So that's one option. You can do that if they meet this very strict criteria. Another option you have is to take them to what we call a urgent walk-in clinic for psychiatric issues. The person has to be voluntary, however. So if the person doesn't have insight to say, I need help, and you say, I'd like to bring you here to get you help, but the person says, I'm not sick, I don't need help, then you're left leaving the person where they are. Of course, jail if there's a crime committed and you're with police, that's another option. Basically there's 4 options. You resolve somebody at a location, you take them voluntarily, you take them involuntarily, or they go to jail. Those are the 4 major options. Outpatient clinics, you cannot take somebody just to, say, Cascadia, that's a big provider in Portland. You can't just take them there. They have to have an intake appointment. In order to have an intake appointment, they have to call somebody. So you have to have the presence of mind to do all that. We can help negotiate that, but if there are waiting lists for people with no insurance, and even if you have insurance and you can get a case manager, then okay, then there are some services available through that route. For crisis situations, the walk-in clinic, if it's voluntary, is the main service. Like I said, involuntary is the hospital. I don't know if that answered your question.
I'd like to follow up.
Please.
So what I gleaned from Captain Westbrook's testimony was that basically to get services, oftentimes you need to commit a crime. Or if you don't commit a crime, you're not going to get access to services. And so could you describe, I guess at the jail is typically where they wind up going if they commit a crime. And so could one or any of you describe what happens at that point, at the jail, what's available, and walk us through that?
I'll start. Maybe if you could explain more what happens at the MIO. Thank you for your questions, Chair Barker and Representative Hicks. Often, once you've committed a crime, and if you are, a couple of things can happen. One, you could be found to not be able to aid in your own defense, and that will get you into some mental health services that you will remain there until you get better or until the case time would run out. And that's happened several times for us. Or once the case is tried and you're put on parole and probation, then often it's through the parole and probation services or through mental health court, as you're putting through, because you have some control over what's going to happen to the person, then that's where some services are available and some monies are freed up to get the person into services, including sometimes housing or because once you get assigned to those caseloads, there's some dollars there, not a lot, but there's some. And Dr. Gerritsen could maybe give more specifics about the mental health unit within the parole and probation, but.
There's a mentally ill offender unit within parole and probation. If you're part of that unit, but the bar in terms of your mental illness to get into that unit is quite high. If you are part of that unit, then there are some wraparound services in terms of medication and follow-up and basically case management.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Tomei.
Thank you, Chair Barker. So I've got a couple of questions, if I may. One of them, what proportion of people do you think who are mentally ill in the streets in Portland are getting some kind of mental health services? Or what percentage aren't getting services? No guess?
Excuse me, Chair Barker and Representative Tomei. Traditionally, law enforcement, and certainly Portland is no exception, what we have been counting for years is every time somebody commits a crime. What we don't record with any consistency is how often are we responding to people who don't commit crimes, but the primary reason we're responding is due to a mental illness or some sort of other social issue. So we can give you our gut on it, which the numbers have increased dramatically. Working in Central Precinct, which is 1/3 of Portland, which is the downtown area, I would say 1/3 of the police calls are people who are mentally ill. And that's the reason that we're going on the calls, when you get to the core of the matter. So, and many of the folks who are at that level of, that people are calling 911 on them, or that we're just driving by and seeing folks walking in the middle of pretty busy streets because they don't know where they are, where they're going, and perhaps screaming and yelling or hitting the cars, as they go by. I mean, really some pretty provocative behavior that a lot of those folks are not receiving any services at all. Sometimes we can hook them up to services because they do meet the criteria, and sometimes we can't. Part of the problem, too, is, and I'm not an insurance expert, I'm learning more than I ever thought I would, but depending on, if somebody might meet the criteria or did meet the criteria to get insurance for quite a while, but once you put people in jail, then that can stop their SSI checks, that changes the, you don't have to reapply, but there's a hold on the insurance, and so it keeps people in this perpetual cycle, and we're kind of working against ourselves in the different systems. So we have some people working very hard to get people insured, and then you go into this other system, and because for whatever reason the rules are that you get kicked off of the dole, and it means that the police just continually respond because of the rotating door nature of the beast.
And so a follow-up to that, if I may. So the gentleman that you described who's living in a 12-foot by 6-foot garbage sort of sound like.
Yes.
Anyway, so what would happen to somebody like that? Probably he's low risk, as you said. He's not harming himself, no danger to other people. And you had to move him because the shop owners were complaining. So what would have happened to him?
Well, for one, he's been there for about 10 years. It's really heartbreaking, and we will move folks. They move within a couple blocks, but until somebody else complains, but it's an ordeal to move them.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that as if it were a burden on us. It's hard on them, and it's confusing, and it creates a situation that sometimes a physical struggle would ensue because they're protecting what's theirs, and there's a misunderstanding, and all the police training in the world wouldn't change that. And I'm always worried at those oftentimes low-risk incidents, let alone the high risk, can end in tragedy. And as I think we all just know by how I've described this, that man's life is tragic, and it's heartbreaking.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, I'd just like to say, sir, Captain, thank you very much for your years of great service in this. And we talk about people have no service at all. They do have service from people like you in your group, and we appreciate your efforts in trying to make Portland and the world a little better place for people who are really in a bad spot. Thank you very much.
It's very kind. Thank you.
Laura Maurer,